She had been standing near the back wall of the grand ballroom for nearly 20 minutes, holding a glass of sparkling water she did not want to drink. The party was meant to be a celebration of her cousin's engagement, but for her, it felt like a quiet test she was already failing. Her name was Clara, and she had spent the last 3 years building a life far away from the whispers and expectations of her family's name. That night, she had chosen a simple navy blue dress, no jewelry except for a thin silver chain her grandmother had given her, and she had left her long dark hair loose and natural. She wanted to be seen for who she was, not for the fortune that followed her last name. But no one seemed to see her at all. The man she had noticed earlier was the reason she had not left yet. He stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small group of laughing friends, his hands in the pockets of a well-fitted gray suit. His name was Ethan, though she did not know that yet. He had dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, and when he laughed, his whole face changed, becoming open and warm in a way that made Clara's chest feel tight. She had watched him for almost an hour, hoping he might glance her way. Twice, their eyes had almost met, but each time he looked past her as if she were part of the wallpaper. She told herself it did not matter. She was not there to meet anyone. She was there to support her cousin, to eat the tiny pastries she loved, and to leave before midnight. But something about the way he moved through the room, easy and confident without being arrogant, pulled at her. She took a small step forward, then stopped. What would she even say? She had never been good at these games. Her mother had tried to teach her the art of conversation at charity dinners, but Clara always found herself saying the wrong thing or being too honest. So she stayed against the wall. An hour passed. The music changed from soft jazz to something with a louder beat. More people arrived, filling the space with expensive perfume and louder laughter. Clara watched Ethan refill his drink and then walk toward a small balcony door. He stood there alone for a moment, and she felt a sudden rush of courage. She put her glass down on a nearby table and began to walk toward him. The distance was maybe 30 feet. She had taken 10 steps when a woman in a red dress touched his arm, and he turned away from the balcony to smile at her. Clara stopped. The woman said something, and Ethan laughed, touching her elbow gently. They knew each other. Clara felt foolish. Of course he had someone. A man who looked like that, who moved like that, was never alone by choice. She turned back, her face warm with embarrassment. She grabbed her glass again and pretended to be very interested in the ice floating in the water. That was when she heard the front doors of the venue open. The sound was not loud, but something in the room shifted. Conversations did not stop exactly, but they softened, heads turning toward the entrance. Clara did not have to look. She already knew who it was. The familiar rustle of silk, the low murmur of her aunt's voice, the heavier footsteps of her father. Her family had arrived. Her mother entered first, dressed in deep emerald green, her silver hair pinned up perfectly. Behind her came Clara's father, a man whose presence filled any room he walked into, not because he was tall or loud, but because of the quiet certainty in his eyes. Then her Aunt Margaret, her Uncle Richard, and finally her grandmother, leaning on her carved wooden cane, but walking as if the floor belonged to her. Clara's heart sank. She had told them she would meet them here, but she had hoped they might arrive after she had already left. Now everyone would know. She watched the ripple effect move through the party. People who had been laughing loudly moments before straightened their backs. A man near the bar adjusted his tie. The host of the party, her cousin's father-in-law-to-be, hurried forward to greet them with a deep bow of his head. Clara's mother smiled her public smile, the one she had worn for 40 years, gracious and warm, but with a sharpness underneath that only her family recognized. And then it happened. Clara was still standing near the back wall, half hidden behind a tall potted plant. She had not moved because she did not want to be seen. But her grandmother had always had eyes like a hawk. The old woman stopped in the middle of the room, turned her head slowly, and found Clara in less than 2 seconds. Her grandmother smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes, and she lifted one hand and waved. Not a small wave, a big, unmistakable wave that every single person in the room could see. "Clara, darling," her grandmother called out, her voice carrying across the space. "Come here. Your father wants to introduce you to the hosts." Every head turned. Every single pair of eyes in that ballroom landed on Clara. She felt her face burn. She wanted the floor to open up. But she had been raised to never embarrass her family in public. So she lifted her chin, put her glass down for good this time, and walked forward. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. She heard whispers. "That's Clara. I didn't recognize her. I thought she was still abroad." She reached her family, and her mother kissed her cheek lightly. "You look lovely, dear." Very simple. It was not a compliment, but Clara did not care. Her father squeezed her hand, and her grandmother linked their arms together. The room was watching, and Clara felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. But then something strange happened. She glanced back, almost without thinking, toward the balcony door where she had seen Ethan standing only minutes before. He was not there anymore. Instead, he was standing much closer, about 15 feet away, and his face had changed completely. The easy confidence was gone. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide, and he was staring at her as if he had never seen her before. Which, she realized with a small, bitter twist in her stomach, he probably had not. Not really. He had looked past her all night. He had ignored her when she was just a woman in a simple blue dress, standing alone. But now that her grandmother had waved, now that her father's name was being whispered through the room, now that everyone knew exactly who she was, he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Clara turned away. She let her grandmother lead her toward the host's table, and she did not look back at him again. But she could feel his eyes on her, a warm pressure against the back of her neck, and she knew that whatever had been quiet and hidden between them was about to become something loud and unavoidable. The night was not over. It had barely begun. For the next hour, Clara was pulled from one introduction to another. Her father's business associates wanted to shake her hand. Her aunt's friends wanted to tell her how much she had grown. Her cousin, the bride-to-be, hugged her tightly and whispered, "I'm so glad you're here. I was so lonely before." Clara smiled and nodded and said all the right things. But her mind kept drifting back to the man in the gray suit. She saw him twice more. The first time, he was standing near the bar, and he was looking at her. Not staring openly, but watching, his head tilted slightly as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. The second time, he was walking toward her, and she felt her heart begin to race. She turned quickly and struck up a conversation with an older woman she did not know, just to have something to do with her hands and her face. She heard footsteps stop behind her. She did not turn around. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved away. Her grandmother noticed. Of course she did. "Who is that young man?" she asked quietly, not looking at Clara but at the champagne glass in her hand. "The one who keeps staring at you like a lost dog." "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "You should find out," her grandmother said. "He has good shoulders. That matters more than money." Clara laughed despite herself, but she shook her head. She remembered how he had looked past her all night. She remembered the woman in the red dress, the easy way he had touched her elbow. She remembered the way his eyes had only truly seen her when her family's name had been spoken aloud. That was not the beginning of a love story. That was the beginning of a transaction. By 11 o'clock, she had decided to leave. She said goodbye to her cousin, promised to call tomorrow, and made her way toward the coat check. The hallway was quieter here, the music muffled by thick walls. She was digging through her small purse for her ticket when a voice came from behind her. "Wait, please." She knew it was him before she turned around. Ethan was standing there, his hands slightly raised as if he was approaching a nervous animal. Up close, he was even better looking than she had thought from across the room. His eyes were a warm brown, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow. He looked nervous. She liked that more than she wanted to admit. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this is strange. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Ethan." Clara did not smile. "Hello, Ethan." He waited for her to give her name. She did not. An awkward silence stretched between them, and she watched him realize that she was not going to make this easy for him. "I saw you earlier," he said finally, "when you were standing near the back wall. I wanted to come talk to you, but I didn't know what to say. I'm not very good at this." Clara looked at him carefully. "You looked very good at it when you were talking to the woman in the red dress." He blinked, then laughed, a short surprised sound. "That's my sister." "Oh." Clara felt heat rush to her cheeks. She looked away. "I didn't know." "How could you?" he said gently. "You don't know anything about me, and I don't know anything about you, except that your grandmother waves like she's signaling a ship." Despite herself, Clara smiled. Just a little. But then she remembered the long hours of being invisible, and the smile faded. "You looked at me all night, Ethan. But you never saw me. Not until people started bowing to my family. That's not a coincidence, and we both know it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands dropped to his sides. For a moment, he looked like a little boy who had been caught stealing cookies. You're right, he said quietly. That's not fair of me to deny. I noticed you when you first walked in. I did, but I was with my friends, and I was being stupid, and I thought you were probably out of my league anyway. And then when your family came in, and everyone moved toward them, I realized you were the same woman I had been too scared to talk to all night. That was my mistake. I'm not proud of it. Clara studied his face. She had learned to read people when she was young, a survival skill in a family where words were often weapons. He looked ashamed, but not defensive. He looked sorry, but not desperate. There was a difference. I'm Clara, she said finally. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. It's nice to meet you, Clara. She did not say it back, but she did not walk away either. And that, she would think later, was the first mistake she made that night. Or the first right thing. She was not sure yet. The party went on without them. But in that quiet hallway, between the coat check and the restroom, something small and fragile began to take shape. It was not love. It was not even trust. It was just two people standing still long enough to look at each other without the noise of a ballroom in between. And for Clara, who had spent her whole life being seen for everything except herself, that stillness felt like the most dangerous thing in the world. She gave him back her smile, just for a second, and then she walked toward the door. She did not look back, but she heard him say, I hope I see you again. And she felt those words settle into her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Her driver was waiting by the black car. She climbed into the back seat and leaned her head against the window. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading it, but something made her open it. Asterisk, it's Ethan. I asked your cousin for your number. I hope that's not too forward. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. And I'd really like the chance to make it up to you. Asterisk. Clara stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed back 3 words. We'll see, Ethan. She put the phone down and watched the city lights blur past the window. Her heart was beating too fast. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. He has good shoulders. Clara laughed softly to herself. She did not know what was going to happen next. But for the first time in a very long time, she wanted to find out. 3 days passed. Clara did not reply to Ethan's first text, but he sent a second one, and then a third. He did not push. He did not apologize again in a way that asked for forgiveness. He simply told her that he had thought about her more than he should, that he remembered the way she had laughed at something her cousin said, that he wished he could hear it again. Each message was short, careful, as if he was testing the ground before putting his full weight on it. On the 4th day, Clara finally answered. She agreed to meet him for coffee, nothing more, at a small cafe near the river where no one from her family would see them. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a table by the window. She told herself she was not nervous. She was lying. When Ethan walked in, he was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, his hair messy as if he had been running his hands through it. He looked younger than he had at the party, less polished, more real. He spotted her immediately and smiled. That same open smile she had seen from across the ballroom. This time, it was aimed directly at her. He sat down across from her and did not try to shake her hand or kiss her cheek. He just looked at her for a moment and said, Thank you for coming. I almost didn't, Clara admitted. I know, he said, but you're here. They talked for 2 hours. Not about her family or his job, or any of the things that usually filled first conversations between strangers who might become something more. They talked about small things. The best place to get pancakes at 2 in the morning. The way rain smelled different in the city than it did in the countryside. The name of her childhood dog, a ridiculous fluffy thing called Sir Barks-a-Lot. Ethan laughed so hard at that name that the woman at the next table turned around to stare. Clara found herself laughing too, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and unused. He told her about his work. He was an architect, still young in his career, still building a name for himself. He lived in a small apartment with too many books and a plant that was slowly dying despite his best efforts. He had grown up in a middle-class family, nothing like hers, and he did not pretend otherwise. Your grandmother scares me, he said honestly. She looked at me like she was measuring me for something. She was, Clara said. She measures everyone. As the afternoon light shifted and the cafe grew busier, Clara realized something that surprised her. She was comfortable. Not the careful comfort she practiced with strangers, but a real ease that made her forget to hold her shoulders so straight. Ethan did not try to impress her. He did not name drop or brag or ask about her money. He asked about her, what she loved, what she was afraid of, what she wanted from a life that had already been planned for her before she was born. She did not answer all of his questions, but she answered more than she had meant to. When they finally stood up to leave, the sun was setting outside the window, painting the river orange and gold. Ethan held the door for her, and they walked out into the cold together. He did not try to hold her hand. He did not try to kiss her. He simply said, "I'd like to see you again, if you'd like to see me." Clara looked at him. The wind was blowing his hair across his forehead. His nose was slightly red from the cold. He was not perfect. He was not smooth or polished or practiced. And that, she realized, was exactly why she said yes. "Okay," she said, "but no more parties." He grinned. "Deal." She walked to her car, and this time, she did look back. He was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her go. She smiled, and he smiled back, and for a moment, the whole noisy city seemed to fall silent around them. Part 2 of their story would not be as simple. There would be her family's disapproval, his own insecurities, and a misunderstanding that would nearly tear them apart before they had even truly begun. But that afternoon by the river, none of that existed yet. There was only the beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real. And for two people who had spent their whole lives performing for others, that small piece of reality was the most precious thing either of them had ever held.